Yeah, first off, it was a great re-addition for him sticking around. Obviously, from his point of view, you could see RJ coming back, Elliott coming back, and now you're adding Ian Jackson to the mix from the guard spot and saying, "Hey, I'm going to go somewhere else and try to start from day one." But obviously, a pull in Chapel Hill, and I think for him, you saw a significant improvement from that freshman to sophomore season, and I think there can be another continued one. Obviously, the season ended in a distasteful manner for him on the bench, and not really getting in much against Alabama in the second half after I think he missed one of those second half shots. But in terms of his junior season, obviously coming off the bench, but I do think continued improvement on that 3-point shot from a percentage. You look and say, oh, he shot 41, but on a very small sample size, and you did see in the ACC play that number dropped down into the 20s from a percentage, and teams were starting to play off of him. But I think when he was attacking the basket, when he was cutting, you could just see the confidence that he was reacting, so quickly and not having to process things maybe like his freshman year. From a defensive perspective, I think we've always seen how he's able to guard on ball. Go back to the Michigan State game where he was blocking, center shots. I think defensively continue to be that pest or be that almost that lockdown defender when he is in the game. I think trying to create turnovers, deflections, steals, getting the team out in transition, I think will be significant from a defensive perspective. And then offensively, I think if he can once again continue to be more of a threat from the 3-point line. Obviously, the percentage increased. Still haven't seen over the 2 years a whole lot of what even when we had him on the podcast maybe 4 years ago now. If he had a go-to move, it's really getting into that pull-up jump shot. And we haven't seen that a lot, but you did start to see him finish better, just given that athleticism, which sometimes as a freshman was you were wondering where he was trying to go with the ball. So I think it's really, and I think it's realistic to expect him to be comfortable in this situation. Won't be surprised that he's finishing games out, especially from a defensive end. But I think, as we're going to see, you can't be a liability offensively. If people are playing off of you, you got to be able to make them pay in other ways. And I think that's always going to be the question for him and Cadeau. But I would see an increase in his overall points per game, an increase in his minutes, not to a great extent, but definitely excited around Tribble and what he can bring now in his third season.
Sherrell, I spent some time with a member of the team recently, and one of the things he said at length was that Seth Trimble is a problem. I want to ask you, what are Sean just laid out kind of what he thinks Seth can bring. I want to ask you, what does Seth have to be? Is there a void of what he absolutely what his floor is, or is there something else that you feel like maybe he's going to bring to the table that he didn't have in his bag last season that could potentially be a real boon to this lineup?
I think what you're looking for from him is continued kind of year over year growth. And to your point, Joey, people are talking about Seth and the way he's playing in some of these pickup games and in some of the organized team activities. Now, that is different than a game. And we've seen when we get these reports, sometimes the guys come out and they do as advertised, and you're like, wow, those reports are correct. And then there are other times with players in recent years where those reports do not come to fruition, and you're kind of like, what was everybody seeing in the offseason? I think Trimble will be closer to the former because I think there is a need on the team for someone to get into transition, someone to defend. I think uh, Jay Billis. I think Jay Billis and Jay Williams. Every time they do a Carolina game, they talk about how fun it is to watch Seth Trimble kind of get into his stance and guard and defend. I think this year he's laid the expectation down that he's going to be a good defender. So this year it's about what can you add offensively that will help UNC. And I think Sean really just nailed everything. There's not a lot else to say in that his shooting percentage was good, but it was a small sample size. So he'll need to continue to be able to do that once the non-conference ends and into ACC play. I think that was one of the issues is that sometimes in ACC play he was a little gun shy, And I think, going back to the Alabama game, since that is the elephant that's beside me right now, and when we talk about Seth Trimble, I think personally that Hubert Davis took him out not because he was taking shots, but because he wasn't taking shots there in the second half. Like if you're going to be in the UNC offense and the way they want to play, if you have an open shot, you have to take it. And I think when he started not taking those shots is when Hubert Davis, went to Paxton Wojcik. So that is my opinion on how that situation went down, and I think it has served as motivation for Seth during the offseason to improve as an overall player. And I think you'll see that. I mean, he has the ability to guard multiple positions. He has the ability to finish in transition, even though there are times where you're kind of like he jumps too soon or is too far. But I think he's growing, and I think you just want to see continued year over year growth. And if you see that, it'll manifest itself in his 3-point shooting numbers. Um, all his other stats are pretty much up. He cut his turnover rate in half last year. His offensive rating went up by like 20 points last year. So you just want to see continued improvement. And there's going to be a role for him too. So I think people who anticipate him not having a role just don't understand the way Hubert Davis has played the last few years, especially when you have younger players who don't get the minutia and finer details of defending in the ACC.
I think one thing to add, and we'll be curious if it's Seth or who it is. Last year in the summer and preseason, we talked a lot about Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram and even Paxton Wojcik from a leadership perspective. And I think you have RJ as a fifth year, but is he the most vocal guy? I think that's the question. Who's going to be bringing that leadership role? I think you saw Cadeau start to get a lot more comfortable as the season went in terms of being vocal on the court and in timeouts. But when you have a guy, now a veteran and third year, can he? I don't. He's not. I don't think he's the personality that's going to fully fulfill that. But can he play a role in that leadership aspect that we saw such an improvement from last year compared to 2 years ago?
Yeah, if you the two guys we're talking about, RJ Davis has been at UNC for 5 years, and who's been at UNC longer? I guess the second longest. It's Jalen Washington and Seth Trimble. Somehow this will be their third year UNC.